So for the Arkansas game, this game honestly happened pretty close to how I expected for the first large part of this game. If you're to ask Nate Oates, he says for about the first 30 minutes, he thought that Alabama played a really good game. He attributes what happened in the second half of the second half, those last 10 minutes, to more watching the scoreboard and not playing to your potential, playing more to the score, and not playing to be the best version of yourself. Because it was clear that Alabama was the better team, right? Alabama, for a huge percentage of this game, was kind of doing what they wanted at will. We had a little bit of a turnover issue in that first half, which I didn't love to see because, we talked a lot about how Alabama was planning to work on turnovers over the off week. I will say credit to Arkansas. I thought that they did a really good job forcing some of those turnovers. We know that Arkansas has a physicality. They also were playing with a swagger that they had gotten back after beating Kentucky and Texas. So that also, played some factor in this as well. But it was just a situation where it felt like Arkansas was able to get a few more steals than you would potentially want and was able to get Alabama out of a rhythm. In the second half, Alabama is able to fix some of those problems. And Alabama, starts that half really by causing a lot of turnovers on Arkansas's end, not having the turnovers on their own, and Alabama just gets out to a pretty large lead. At one point, we think it's 20. However, they wave off a goaltend, so it ends up being an 18-point lead. And from that point forward, Arkansas went on a massive run to cut it to 3 points. And Nate talked about how the team kind of had to button down and be ready and kind of show their toughness and fight to win this game. Because it was something that disappoints him and disappoints all of us because, clearly Alabama was the better team. Alabama had, even though Avicic and Big Z had an incredible game, Ken Palm actually has him as the game MVP for this game. But Big Z was incredible in that first half. But even with that being said, Alabama still had really played their game, right? A lot of it, I think, also may have had to do with Adu Thiero was in some foul trouble at moments in this game. He got 4 with about 15 minutes to go. So he was in foul trouble kind of throughout this game. But it was a situation where Alabama was really imposing their will, even though Arkansas was giving some good counterpunches. And then when Alabama gets up 18, for whatever reason, like I said, and Nate Oates attributes it to watching the scoreboard. Nate Oates attributes it to, instead of playing to your potential, playing to what the other team is giving you. And that's not something you want to see, right? We've seen that at other points in this season. You saw that in the Vanderbilt game at one point, where Vandy just goes on a tear in the second half. And so it's something that this team has been susceptible to at times, but it's definitely something that you don't want to see moving forward because, especially on the road, Arkansas had a couple of bounces where they definitely could have won this game, right? And they should not have been in it because of how much better Alabama was from really, like I said, from the start of this game through about 30, 32 minutes through this game. Alabama was clearly the better team, and then Arkansas, to their credit, is able to get to bring it back to the 3-point lead, and then Alabama ends up closing it out. I think that there were a few players that really played massive roles in this game. When I wrote the pregame thread over on Twitter and talked about this game, one of the things that I pointed out, and I thought it was going to be a big focal point for this game, was how was the 2-point percentage, what was it going to look like, right? Because Arkansas was number 1 in the SEC in 2-point defense, but as we know, Alabama is number 1 in 2-point offense, right? People talk about Alabama as this team that just takes a ton of threes, and in some cases they are, but where Alabama has made its hay a lot this season is being successful at the rim. Nate Oates, often talks about how he doesn't take a lot of, away from the rim twos. In fact, in this game, they didn't have a single non-rim two, but the 2-point shot was the difference in this game. Alabama is able to get the better of Arkansas, and a huge piece of this is, Alabama only takes 19 threes in this game. Arkansas actually took more threes than Alabama did in this game, and Alabama just did not shoot to their full percentage that you would expect them to shoot. They shot just 26% from 3. But the reason they're able to win this game and be so successful is they shot 67% from 2. That's that percentage that you've seen all season where Alabama, over the course of the season, has been elite at the rim, right? Whether it be Cliff Amore, whether it be guys like Aiden Holloway has done really good at the rim. Another guy this game that was a huge difference maker at the rim, Grant Nelson had one of his better games. Mohamed Diabate, right? We've talked a lot about him and about, the off-road package. They actually used one of the off-road package plays for the end of half. Alabama's had some issues at end of half, end of game scenarios. And, we got it to Mo D. He's able to score at the end of half, which is something that I know a lot of Bama fans are really happy to see. But Mo goes 7 of 9 from the rim, right? That's something that you really expect to see out of a guy like Mo, how physical, how hard he plays. I feel like he may have, held the ball in his hands a little too much, which led to some of those turnovers. He ended up having 4 turnovers in the game. I think part of that was he was, handling the ball a little more than you would generally want to see him have. But even with the turnovers, Alabama only ends up with 14, right? A few more than you would ideally want, but as we've talked at length about, Nate Oates' team, just due to the pace in which they play, often will have, over 10 turnovers just because of the pace, right? And that same pace would be more like a 7-8 turnover of a different team, right? So the quantity isn't quite as much of a concern. Like I said, it was a few more than I would ideally want, but it wasn't the most confusing thing for me. Like I said, we do play with more pace than anyone else in the country, so just due to the speed in which we play, you're going to have a few extra turnovers, just a, percentage base. That's pretty normal. I thought that Alabama left some shots at the line, which definitely could have costed us. We ended up going 12 of 18 from the line, whereas Kentucky goes 18 of 21. When you get on the road and you're in a fairly tough place to play, and, especially with Arkansas not being as good this season, Bud Walton has not had that reputation this season. But when Arkansas is at its best, Bud Walton Arena is one of the tougher places to play in the country. The fans really get engaged, are very loud, and it's a situation where you just can't miss that many free throws, right? Alabama left some points at the line, and that's something that, again, could come back to bite you, but I think that it is something that, because Alabama was able to, play their game and, grab a few offensive rebounds. Grant has a huge one at the end of the game with an offensive rebound and a putback. There's just a few things that thankfully went our way. Alabama was able to come out with the win, but when you go on the road to a tough place to play, think about when you go on a road to Missouri, when you go on the road to Tennessee, when you go on the road to Auburn. Those are some games where you're going to have to make all the plays, and that includes hitting your free throws. That includes, playing your game, not letting the other team storm back if you get a lead, just playing your game and playing to your potential. So I think that's where Nate is going to have, kind of the most teaching points out of this game is, when you get up the lead, when you get where you need to be, just put it away. Put the game away, and you got it. I think that overall, this is a game where the guy that's kind of the most, I wouldn't say surprising, but the biggest bright spot for me over the last little bit of a run has been Chris Youngblood. I know he didn't have his best shooting performance today, but I think that what he's able to do and the physicality he's able to bring and the experience he's able to bring from South Florida is something that you can definitely tell, and it's a big difference that we did not have in non-con play just because you didn't have Chris. I think having Chris and what he's been able to do and what he brings you from an offensive perspective as well, another shooter, a knockdown guy, a really good defender, a physical body that doesn't get bullied off the block. He's somebody that I think is a big impact. He started this game as well, especially with Philon still coming back from the injury. I would suspect Youngblood continues to or keeps starting kind of. I think this is a foreseeable future thing personally, just because I do think that Youngblood brings you a little bit something extra, whereas I think Philon coming in with like an Aiden Holloway is another good spot for him. Same thing with Aiden, right? Aiden goes 2 for 4 from 3. So statistically, he's at his 50% number, but the ones he missed are even ones that aren't typically seeing Aiden miss. So, you're really happy with the shots he's taking. He only ended up finishing with 8 points. But Aiden had 4 assists and 5 rebounds, right? That's not something you're always going to see out of Aiden, being the smallest guy on the court at most times. And then the last guy I want to talk about, and from a perspective of, if you're just looking at the stat line, you may think that Mark Sears had a bad game. He only had 11 points. He had 6 turnovers. But a couple of things to note. The turnovers, I'm not super concerned about them because of how they happened. I know a couple of them were definitely his fault. A couple of them were some miscommunication. A couple of them were just playing quickly and trying to, hit the certain pass, and either it goes off of Cliff's hands and it's the receiver of the pass. It wasn't actually the passer that caused the turnover. They just attribute it to, the guy that threw the pass. So I'm not super concerned with the number. I would like to see that number come down a little bit, obviously, but I don't want to attribute all 6 of those to him. But the reason I want to bring up Mark is he actually won the hard hat, right? And it's something that Nate talked about is, maybe not his best offensive performance, goes 1 of 4 from 3, just 4 of 8 from the field. But he does play really tough, loses himself in the game, wins the hard hat, and was able to kind of will the team. Him, Chris Youngblood, Grant Nelson, Cliff Amore, all of your super seniors are able to kind of will the team to the victory down the stretch, right the ship, understand like, hey, we did not play how we needed to this last 4-minute stretch. We have to find what we need, and Alabama was able to come out with the win, right? Chris Youngblood hits a couple of big free throws, and Alabama was able to come out with the win and move on, survive, and advance to the next game. Now Alabama is actually tied for the lead in the SEC following Auburn's loss. So Alabama controls its own destiny, right? Prior to this game, Alabama did not control its own destiny with Auburn having not lost yet. But now that the SEC is evened out with Alabama and Auburn both having 1 loss in conference, Alabama controls its own destiny. And, they need to take care of business on Tuesday against Texas, and then look ahead right after that game and get prepared for the showdown that's going to happen in Coleman Coliseum for sole possession of first place in the SEC, right? So that's what I want to talk about with the Arkansas game. Like I said, individual performances, I don't think that, you didn't have like the absolute insane performance out of anybody. I know you had some guys that played really well. You played pretty well as a team. I thought Cliff Amore has done better and better. I thought that, like I said, I thought Mo Diabate did really good at, his finishing around the rim. But, overall, this was a team win. This was Alabama playing its game and able to outlast Arkansas and able to get up to a lead, which unfortunately they did lose part of. So you want to see us clean up some of that, but I think that Alabama is completely okay. And, any win on the SEC in the road is a good one. So happy you got it and you move on to the next game.